All right, good morning, everybody. This session is called Demystifying DAX, and in this session we're going to take a look at DAX, or Data Analysis Expressions, and talk about what that is and how to use it and where to use it and why that's important in the life of a Power BI analyst or a Power BI developer. So if that's what you're looking to learn today, you are in the right place. I just wanted to take a moment, though, and thank all of the sponsors who made this event possible. These things can't happen without the support of both you guys, so thank you for coming out, but also these great sponsors for helping to make sure that everything that needs to get funded gets funded. So please make sure you stop by, say hello to them, connect with them, and thank each one of them individually. So my name is Michael Hewitt. I'm a BI analyst, developer. I wear all the data hats. I'm a Christian, I'm a husband, and I'm a father of three. I work for Hunt Brothers Pizza. We're based just up the road out of Nashville, Tennessee. And like I said, I pretty much wear all the data hats there. I, along with one of my colleagues named Mark, we run a training course as well online called Power BI at Work. And I'm also one of the co-organizers of the Power BI user group in Nashville. And so if you're a Power BI Fabric user, we would love to have you join us on our user group meetings. We're actually meeting virtual right now on the third Thursday of every month at 11:30 Central, so that would be 12:30 if you're Eastern time here in Chattanooga. But we'd love to have you. We love having folks from all around the country join us, but especially love having Tennesseans and folks in this area be a part of the group. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll shoot you guys straight here a little bit. Is that okay? I normally do this session in like 55 minutes, so I might get talking a little fast, and if I do, just wave your arms and say, whoa, hey, Michael, slow down a little bit, okay? I like a little feedback in the session, and always open to that. And with that in mind, there are some session evals in the back of the room over by the cooler. So if you wouldn't mind grabbing one of those and fill one of those out, feel free to bring it on up and say hi when the session's over. That feedback is so valuable to make sure that these sessions are of good value to you, are relevant to you, and if there's things that stink, let me know so I can make the session better. Or if there's something that you like, let me know so I can keep doing that, and it can help other folks. But that's enough about talking about me. I want to hear about you guys. So I want to know, where are you guys at with DAX today? And if you scan that QR code up in the left-hand corner, we will get a sense of kind of where you guys are at. Okay. Got some folks who are really new to DAX. Okay. Some other folks, looks like this won't be the first time that you've been exposed to the DAX language before. Okay. A good mix. All right. So who in the room would say my role is like I'm a data analyst and I'm using Power BI or analysis services today? Are you more? Okay, got one. How about Power BI, like a BI developer? No? Okay. All right, very cool. Good. What other roles do we have represented?
Project management.
Project manager, okay. Yeah?
I'm a software developer and I'm integrating with the stack of Power BI.
Okay, yep, very good.
Senior software engineer.
Okay, software engineer, yeah?
Business analyst.
Business analyst, okay, yeah, very good. That's one of the cool things about Power BI is it touches so many different roles that even if you don't have BI in your title, you still get to use it. The great news is if you touch Power BI in any capacity besides just consuming a report, DAX is going to be really important and really relevant for you to know. So thanks for taking a minute and helping me learn about who you guys are. Here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to take a really high-level look at DAX. So we're going to take an overview. We're going to talk about why context is so important when you're working with DAX. I'm going to lay out a DAX learning path for you too to kind of help give you kind of a look down the road, if you will, on if you want to keep growing with this language, at least give you some suggestions on how to do that. And I want to show you some DAX in action with a demo, and that should get us through our time together today. I will make some room at the end too, as we have time for any questions. But I've been in Power BI pretty much since it came out, so almost 10 years. Power BI's birthday is next month, and so as a longtime Power BI user, that means that I've gotten to teach other colleagues, other folks in the organizations that I've worked for, in fact, how to use Power BI. And in fact, at a previous job, I had some training responsibilities, and like I mentioned, help run a training course now in Power BI. And so a lot of times when people hear Power BI and they've seen some of the marketing materials, they say, oh, this is great. It's all just click and drag and drop. And we start teaching and say, well, there's a formula language, and to really get the most out of Power BI, you're going to want to learn this formula language. All of a sudden, I start seeing a lot of faces that look like this. People start getting scared. They say, no, hold on. I don't want to write any code. And occasionally, if they don't quite look this scared, they give me that look, where they're going, no, Michael, I'm done. I don't want to write any code. It's not the easiest thing to do, but it's not scary. Once you kind of learn how to get going with code, just like it might take you a little while to get comfortable writing Excel formulas, once you do, this is the kind of feeling you start to get. You're over at your desk, you write the coolest formula you've ever written, and you just, yes, this was a great day today. It's so satisfying, much like the joy these guys got to experience in winning a national championship. So this is the kind of thing that we're after, and I want to inspire you to keep going with DAX so that this can be your workday. So what even is DAX? DAX is short for Data Analysis Expressions, and it's a very functional language. It's similar in its syntax to Excel formulas, so we'll look at that in a little bit. You'll get to see if you've written Excel formulas, you can transition into writing DAX fairly seamlessly. And DAX was created specifically for working in data models. And I would even add to that a little bit and say it's created specifically for working in data models in the Microsoft stack. So DAX isn't going to be written in Tableau or Click or any other BI tools. It's going to be solely within Microsoft BI products. There are a few prerequisites, I think, to writing DAX. You want to have a good understanding of data modeling. So you don't really have to be a coder to write DAX, but you want to understand some star schemas. You want to be able to understand a little bit of relational database design, because when you model your data in that way, DAX performs at its very best. Like I said a moment ago, a little bit of experience with Excel formulas can also be helpful. It's not a requirement, but if you have written Excel formulas, making the transition into writing DAX does tend to be a little bit easier. So, who do I think should learn to write DAX? My thoughts here may be a little bit biased, but I think everybody should. I think everybody in this room should learn to write DAX. But my honest professional opinion is that if you're going to work with Power BI, create any sort of reports, dashboards, anything beyond, again, just consuming a report that somebody else has built, you should at least learn some basic DAX because it will serve you really, really well. You'll get a return on the investment that you put in to learn it. So you're going, okay, I'm still not convinced. I hear you. You're saying I should learn this. But why should I learn it? Well, I think it's worth learning mainly because the language continues to grow. So at the time I created the slides, there was 250 DAX functions. That was about a year ago. And I think they've added maybe 10 more during that year. So it's continually growing. Microsoft is iterating. It's finding new things, getting feedback from the community to make sure that we're able to code up the kind of stuff that we need to see within our Power BI report. So it's always growing. Lots of cool things you can do with these DAX functions. Learning DAX allows us to implement custom business logic. So how many people touch reports where you just need really simple aggregations? You don't need anything custom. Yeah, nobody's hand goes up. Because every business is unique. Every report within our business, every dashboard within our business is unique. And so by learning to write some code, learning to write some DAX, gives us the opportunity to implement that custom business logic. And not only that, but now we can start getting into some complex calculations as well. So within Power BI, if we're clicking and dragging and dropping, we're very limited. We can't do much beyond summing or counting or averaging. So if we actually have to apply some statistics, we can't do that without writing DAX. And probably the bread and butter of learning DAX is that of those 250 DAX functions, there's a bunch that are called time intelligence functions. This is where Power BI shines. And if there's no other reason to convince you to learn DAX other than that, that's the big one. So what does that mean? What that means is we can write one formula or a few different formulas or measures as they're called that allow us to look at and compare different time periods depending on how we want to visualize that. So all of that is the time intelligence feature. What's great about it though is Microsoft keeps implementing new ways within Power BI to make writing those time intelligence measures fairly simple, but they're extremely powerful. And if we're honest, most of the work we're doing in our reporting, or at least a good chunk of it, and almost every report we write, we've got to compare this year to last year, or year to date, or last year to date, or month, or quarter, whatever those time periods are that are relevant. This one is really going to help you to deliver some cool stuff to the folks in your organization. And the final reason I think you should learn DAX is that when you learn DAX, you get an expanded formatting opportunities. So lots of things you can do in the UI to format your visuals to make them look the way that you want. But you can do even more by writing additional DAX to customize colors, add different icons and such to your visuals. And the only way to do it is through writing DAX. So lots of different reasons there to learn it. So if I'm going to learn this, like where then can I use DAX? Where can I write that? Well, primarily people think of DAX in Power BI. Yes, it can be written there. But DAX actually also can be used within Microsoft Fabric. So if you're building semantic models, or if your organization is investing in Fabric and wants to have semantic models that are a part of your Fabric capacity, DAX gets written in those semantic models as well. If you're using Power Pivot for Excel, DAX can be written there as well. And any type of SQL Server that you are running with Azure Analysis Services or on-prem SQL Server Analysis Services, if you've got a tabular model running in either of those, you can write DAX in those models. Good news is, it's all the same. Once you kind of learn the syntax, once you get going with it, you can apply it across any of these different tools, and 99% of the time, it's the same formula is going to give you the same results. So, how should you learn to write DAX? That's probably where the questions start to get a little bit tougher. A lot of different ways that you can learn to write DAX. But good news for you guys is, here's a great list of resources to help you get started. So I generally recommend starting with a website called dax.guide. There's a couple of Italian guys named Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari. If you're going to write DAX, those are two names to know. They are like the godfathers of this language, and they know more about DAX than probably everybody else I know who knows DAX will ever know. But they are extremely good teachers, and they produce a lot of great content around this language. So they've created a site called dax.guide, lists out every one of the DAX functions available, how to use it, where to use it, when to use it, what the syntax is, and for a lot of the functions, they even show, hey, if you do it this way, you're probably going to break it or get the wrong result. So they show you how not to do it also. It can be really helpful. Now there's also the Microsoft, the same basic idea, but it's the more official Microsoft version. That's also a good one to look at. And then if you just want to learn, besides just learning syntax and the actual code of DAX, the SQL BI site is a great place to go. DAXpatterns.com, basically it's exactly what it sounds like. They lay out all different kinds of reusable patterns within the DAX language that you can take and apply to your specific use cases. And then DAX Formatter, one of the great things about DAX is it ignores white space, so you can format it to your heart's content, make it look pretty, easy to read, comment it all up, and DAX Formatter is a great site that you can paste in all of your DAX and hit a button and it cleans it all up. Really handy tool. So all of these resources are great places to get started when you want to start writing DAX. Once you've gotten started, you've utilized these resources, and by the way, I've been writing DAX for probably 8 years. I still frequent these sites on a regular basis, so keep coming back to them. But once you kind of got your legs under you, you get going. The best way to learn DAX is to just keep practicing. Just keep trying, keep going. After you've practiced a little bit, then practice some more. And after you've practiced some more, find a project that you can implement these new skills and write some DAX on that, whether that's at work or a passion project on the side, and keep practicing. Because DAX is one of those things where you really have to practice. You have to, it's a bit like, it's not quite like riding a bike where after a few times you get going. It's more like driving a car, I would say, where you just have to keep at it. If you don't do it for a really long time, you have to think about it pretty hard again. So just keep practicing. Keep practicing and keep practicing, and it will start to feel very, very natural to you. So when you are working with DAX, there's a few terms that are important to know. If you're going to write DAX, you're either going to write a measure. This is the most common. So a measure is a flexible calculation. You can use that measure multiple times. You write it once, use it multiple times. You can use that measure in different visuals, or if you're working in Excel, different pivot tables, and so on and so forth. You can actually use a measure in another measure too, and we'll look at that in the demo. DAX can also be used to create something called calculated columns. Now there's some people whose spidey senses just went off in the DAX community and they said, oh, calculated columns, don't listen to this guy. Well, okay. Calculated columns have some gotchas, they have some flags, they have some things we got to watch out for with them. But calculated columns are really helpful because they're a great way to start writing DAX. We're going to look at a calculated column in just a moment. Not only can we add a column to a table, that's what a calculated column is, we can actually write DAX to create an entire table within our semantic model. Finally, we can use DAX as a query language. So if you've built a semantic model, you've got it sitting out in your Fabric capacity, or you've got an analysis services model that's out in prod, you could write DAX to query that model, much like you might write SQL or Python to get at a database or wherever, a data lake, wherever else your data might be stored. DAX can be a query language as well. And you'll get results back just like you would running a SQL query in SSMS. The newest way to write DAX, it's maybe a year and a half old now, is called visual calculations. So typically when we're writing DAX, we're writing a measure, we're writing a column or a table, and that particular element is living within our semantic model. So it gets reused, right? Well, a visual calculation just is DAX that's living kind of in the context of a single visual within our Power BI report. So, like I said, it's still a fairly new feature. It's not one we're going to look at today, but one I just want you to be aware of. There are some good use cases for visual calculations. It's a little beyond what we're going to cover here in a 101 course. Like I said, got to be aware a little bit of calculated columns, and for that matter, calculated tables. So, the reason for that is because calculated columns, calculated tables don't get the same benefits of columnar compression that you would get if you, say, wrote an additional column in a SQL view and then imported that data into Power BI. We won't get too technical with it, but basically what happens when you write a calculated column or a calculated table in DAX is that all of that data, those additional calculations, all that gets stored within memory. So just think, if I'm importing that, I'm getting an optimized, compressed version of my data that helps free up memory. If I write a calculated column, especially if I write it against a really, really big table in my model, that could take up a lot of memory, whether that's on my server, on my local machine, if I'm working locally with Power BI Desktop. So you got to be aware of that. So the good rule of thumb to think of when you're working with calculated columns or calculated tables is, hey, this might be something I use temporarily. I'm testing out some DAX. I want to see how it responds in the context of this table, but I'm going to use it temporarily. Or use calculated columns as a way to learn DAX. And that's actually where we're going to start in just a moment. It's a really easy way to find out, is my code working? See the results of what I'm writing. But only use it when you don't have another scenario. This is the only way to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish. If you can push those calculated columns and those calculated tables upstream into a SQL view, into your database somewhere, if that makes sense and that's an option, that's the best way to do it. You're going to get the best performance out of your semantic model pretty much in every scenario by doing that. So does that make sense to everybody? Cool. One other important thing to remember when you're writing DAX is that context is very, very important. And there are two types of contexts to be aware of. The first is filter context. So Marco and Alberto, or the Italians as we call them, define filter context as a set of filters applied to a data model before the evaluation of an expression starts. So that's still, I think, the best way that I've ever found filter context succinctly defined. Some of you may be going, what does that even mean? Don't worry about it too much, because I'll show you what it means in just a moment, and then you'll go, oh, okay, I see what they mean here. But just be aware that all the filters that we use in Power BI have an effect on what's happening with our DAX. The other context is row context. So in row context, some DAX functions are going to look at every row in the table and it's going to say, okay, take this value from column A and multiply then this value from column B and give me a result. Now go to the next row, do the same calculation, the next row, and the same calculation. And so as the DAX engine in Power BI is iterating over all of those rows, it's got to know, well, what row am I on now? What row's coming next? So that's called row context. Okay? So those two contexts are the most important things as far as context goes for us to remember in DAX. Filter context and row context. Now, getting on in your DAX journey, you'll find that there's ways that you can manipulate these contexts and make a row context become a filter context. Don't worry about that, but there's crazy things like that that you can do in DAX. That's way on down the road. So, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to give you guys a learning path. So we're all the way there at the left today, DAX 101. And we just want to, really at this point, we're trying to get familiar with DAX. We want to learn the syntax. We want to understand how having a good data model sets us up to write the best DAX. We want to take a look at a few different of the basic functions that we can start working with. Maybe look at an if kind of function. Talk about divide, and introduce the Swiss Army knife of all DAX functions called calculate. So that one we will definitely look at. As you progress in working with DAX, there are some functions that are called iterator functions, or they're kind of nicknamed X functions, such as like SumX or AverageX. And those functions utilize that row context. So there are times where you need DAX to iterate over the different rows in your table to give you the correct calculations across your visuals, and so you need those iterator functions. We can also introduce variables in DAX at that point. Start getting into some different, more complex type of filtering in that level. So the DAX starts to get a little bit more complex. This is the spot where you're implementing your custom business logic. In DAX 301, we typically like to start talking more about time intelligence. By that point, we're feeling pretty comfortable. We can write some good DAX measures. We've learned our way around the language. Feeling pretty good about what we're doing. So by that point, we're really ready to hit time intelligence. And then at like a 401 level, we can actually say, well, okay, my company kind of uses a different type of calendar than the standard calendar that we're all used to. Well, how does time intelligence work with that? Well, then we can show you some different patterns and different ways of saying, okay, if you're on a fiscal calendar, we can still use DAX. We can still get all the fun of time intelligence in DAX. We just got to do it in a little bit more of a custom a custom manner. And so at the 400 level, that's where we would cover things like that. We're looking at implementing more complex DAX patterns. That's when I like to start teaching DAX as a query language too. It can get a little bit more complex, write a lot longer bits of code, talk more about context switching and things like I was mentioning, making your row context, filter context, things like that. Stuff that it's okay to be aware of at this point, but you don't really need to get started. You don't need to be aware of how it works or why it's doing what it's doing, but that's all the kind of nerdy stuff we get to down the road. There's lots of other DAX features that we can get to. Calculation groups is a great one. Once you really get comfortable with the language to implement, it can really help actually produce a great UX in Power BI. So that's kind of where we're at, but we're just going to look at kind of those high-level functions and get started here in Power BI. All right. So I've got a blank Power BI report here. I actually downloaded from, I think it was from SQL BI. They put together a model called Contoso, very, very standard across Microsoft BI stuff, and actually did a lot of the work in getting it modeled for us. So there is our data model. Everybody see that okay? Very good. So this is a very simple model, fairly clean data to work with here that they've given us. So this is great stuff to learn with. We've got one fact table down here. That's this guy right here. That's our sales table. Okay, so Contoso is basically a fictitious international sales company. They sell all kinds of different products. Okay, and then we've got up here 4 different dimensions: a date dimension, a store dimension, a product dimension, and a customer dimension. So thanks to all the folks at SQL BI for getting this set up in a nice star schema. As you can see, we've got from our dimensions, nice one-to-many relationships. I've got this view set up as the collie view with dimensions across the top and the fact across the bottom. So we see that everything here, our filter direction is set to all point towards our fact table. Okay. There's also a currency exchange table. I kind of have it set up as a fact. We're not really going to use it today, but since this is an international company, they've included that so that we could, translate dollars to euros and so on and so forth, actually across several different currencies. That's what that table is. It's kind of sitting off there by itself. We're not really going to use that much today. So, as I mentioned, one of the best places to start when you're writing DAX actually is with a calculated column. So I'm going to switch over to the table view here and select our sales table. And I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see kind of what data we've already got. We've got keys set up to all of our dimension tables, a variety of different keys. And once we kind of get over here into the actual facts data, we've got a quantity, a unit price, a net price, a unit cost, and then some codes if we want to exchange, use that exchange rate table to convert the dollars that all the data was captured in to a different denomination. We're not, like I said, we're not going to worry about that today. But the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to calculate each line where we can calculate an extended price. Because there are some lines in this fact table where more than one is entered on a quantity. There's some lines with 2 up to 10 different items ordered on that line. And our unit price is only going to show us what a single unit costs. So if we're going to report on this, we probably want to know, well, if I bought 6 of the thing, how much did that customer actually pay? So we need an extended price calculation to show us that. And to do that, we're going to start with a new calculated column. So up here in the ribbon, I select new column. I get a new blank column over here. And then our formula bar appears. And I've got column equals and my flashing cursor. So it looks a lot like Excel, right? Very similar. Cool. So the syntax here that we're looking at is that column, in this case, is the name of our column. We can have spaces. Be careful using numbers sometimes. Sometimes Power BI doesn't like that. But generally, we can name our columns with pretty flexible names. So we're going to call ours extended price. And then to get that, we need to multiply quantity by unit price. So I'm just going to start typing in quantity. And our IntelliSense pops up and it says, I think I know what you're going for. You're looking at the sales table and the quantity column, right? And I say, why, yes, I am. So I'll hit Tab to accept its suggestion. Again, here to the left, it's referring to a table. And then within the square brackets is referring to the column within that table. Then I'll use the standard multiplication operator. All the operators within DAX are they're exactly the same as what you're used to working with in Excel. And then I'm just going to kind of repeat here to find the unit price column. I can arrow up and down to find the particular column I'm looking for. And now I've got a formula here that contains the logic that I want for my extended price column. I'm going to hit enter. And if I sneak back over here to the right, I can start to reason check my code. Did I get it right? 1 times 197.1 does indeed equal 197.1. So that looks good. Let's just double check. Does 2 times 1,000 equal 2,000? I think it does. We're good. So I think we have good math this morning. So, looks like our calculated column is working. But you can see then why working with the calculated column can actually be kind of helpful to get started, right? That was pretty easy for us to go write some code, reason check it really fast. We did that in like 2 minutes. So that's a good way to get started. Now, if I was going to publish this model, I would not do what I just did. I would do that calculation somewhere else because this sales table could get up to billions of rows. If I'm a really large company, I want the benefits of compression down the road on that column. Save me some space. I'm pretty sure finance would be happy with me for that. And even though storage is cheap, we don't want to store more than we have to, and we don't want to have to scale up our server more than we have to. So right there, now we have written DAX. Good news, guys. We are ready to rock. So let's go back over to the report view now, and I want to do a couple more things here before we run out of time. So I'm going to zoom back out. When you're writing DAX, I always like to either start with a table or a matrix. It's not always as fun as creating some of the other visuals, but having a visual that shows us all these numbers helps us to verify that we are writing good DAX, and that our logic is actually implementing the way that we think it does. So I'm going to open up our date dimension over here on the right, bring over the year column. Let's put it on that visual instead. And then I'm going to drop in the extended price column. Now, did anybody catch what happened when I just clicked on that column? Yes, exactly. Power BI said, oh, that's a column full of numbers. And it's signified here over with the little Greek symbol over here to show us, hey, wait, I see that is numbers. You're probably going to want to aggregate that. And it just guessed that I'd probably want to summarize all those numbers in that column. It is correct. That's what I wanted to do. So what this is called here is an implicit measure. We've just dragged and dropped. Now, this can work for some quick kind of exploratory analysis, but we actually want to write an explicit measure. An explicit measure is where we write DAX. If we use an implicit measure, remember I said measures are reusable. If we have an implicit measure, not so much. That's one time. Every time I would want to sum extended costs, I have to drag that extended cost back over, make sure the right aggregation is selected, hope that Power BI does the aggregation correctly. Or I can write DAX, do it once, verify that it's right, and just reuse that measure over and over. So we always prefer explicit measures. So I'm going to add one of those now, and I'm just going to call it total price, and that will be the sum. IntelliSense will pop up and say, okay, if you want to use the sum measure, give me the name of the column from your table that you'd like to summarize. Gives me all the different columns available in my model. So I'm just going to search for extended price. And there you go. Put some spaces in there to make it easy to read. But now we're using some DAX expressions. We want to sum all of the values in the sales extended price column. Okay? So let's go back and add that now to our table visual. So we're looking now at our total price by year. Very simple visual. Okay? Let me show you what's going on though behind the scenes, because this is one of the important parts about writing DAX, is starting to think like DAX. So let's say we want to know, how are we getting this value right here? The total price for 2023. Anybody remember, what do you guys think is important right here and what we're talking about from what I shared earlier? Any guesses?
It's using that calculated column.
It is. Right. So this is filter context that we're talking about here. So what's happening is that Power BI is saying, okay, I recognize from your date table that you have year on the table, and to get that value, I need to know that the year is 2023. So imagine that the date table is filtering down from all those years that we have just down to 2023. Then, because we're modeled in a star schema, that filter is passing from the one side of the relationship down through that relationship to the many side of the relationship, which is where our fact table is. That filter gets applied to our sales table. So then it says, okay, if it's not 2023, out of here. Filter down to 2023, then apply the sum function over our extended price. Then summarize that and return that value back to our visual. Does that make sense? Everybody kind of following along, like what the DAX is doing? Now, we could apply a bunch of different slicers and filters and make that filter complex much more complex, but the same principle applies. In fact, we could, let me show you one more thing, and then we'll wrap it up, and I'll take a couple of questions. But we could apply a filter within our measure as well. And we could say, well, maybe I just want a measure that shows me what are my sales. We'll stick with 2023. I always want to know what are my sales for 2023. So I can write a measure, and I could say, okay, if I need to calculate something that is specifically filtered to a date, that's where I got to pull out the Swiss Army knife. So I'm going to use a calculate. Calculate is really well named because you're basically saying, all right, calculate some sort of aggregation and then apply whatever filters that I explicitly tell you in the measure to apply. So in this case, we will use total price. So now we're going back to that measure I wrote a couple minutes ago. I'm reusing that measure here. Couldn't do that with an explicit measure, but I can since I've saved an explicit measure to my model, and now I can apply a filter. So to apply a filter, I can say, look at the date, and give me the year column, and then we'll just say calculate total price where the date equals 2023, where that year equals 2023. Okay, so now I've got new DAX measure 2023 sales. I'm going to add that to my visual. Look at that. Seems a little bit weird that I would have the same value repeating, but because I've hard-coded
2023.
exactly, since I've hard-coded 2023, DAX is saying, okay, that takes priority. So now in that measure, my filter context becomes 2023 regardless of what the visual says. You might say, why would I ever want to do that? Well, now I could say, well, now I want to compare 2015 to 2023. What's the variance? I could write a measure that says, all right, total price minus 2023 sales. And it'll show me the variance for every other year on our visual. And so that's where you can start, that's where your creativity can kick in, and we can get some different options, and you can implement all of that logic that you have in your business. Now we could sit here and write DAX all day long, but there's no time for that. So with that, we'll kind of conclude that demo there. I think we're about at time, but I'm happy to take any questions that you guys have here as we switch rooms, and we'd love to talk to all you guys. Thank you so much for attending today, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Go check out some other sessions and have fun. Thanks for coming.